This was the penultimate episode of the Bad Batch series as a whole, and it's really starting to sink in for me now, the fact that we only have one episode left with these characters before their stories are over. I really do hope the final episode is a bit longer too. There's a lot to wrap up, between the main storyline on Mount Tantiss, giving all of these characters their farewells, Rex, Cody, and CX2 if we get explanations for those, the Zilla Beast, which we saw in this episode, and then Project Necromancer and Palpatine's Vault, which I still don't think we've seen all of yet. There's a lot that I'd like to see covered and explained in the final episode, so unless there's another series on the way to continue part of this story, I don't see how they can do all of that in 25 minutes. Staying where we are though with this episode, I really liked how the episode picked up instantly in hyperspace and the music kept the tension from the end of last episode. Between the scanners upon arrival, the deadly jungle on Wayland, and Echo being alone on the Science vessel, there's a lot of ways that things can go bad quickly. We also learned that the Empire became aware of their infiltration of the orbital station at some point, as well as Rampart's involvement in all of that, although it isn't specified when. After the Bad Batch arrive above Tantiss, they are quickly confronted by Imperial forces, and something that I enjoyed but was fairly minor was how serious Hemlock took security on Tantiss. So many times before we've seen Imperials brush off any oddity in the system, allowing rebels to infiltrate and ultimately defeat them. But we're shown here how both Tantiss and Hemlock are different than the Imperial norm. He's not taking any chances and doesn't ignore any sign. He wants it all dealt with, whether it be through the initial V-Wings, the laser cannons, sending patrols to the crash site, having the entire Science vessel searched and scanned, or moving to search the jungle after the crash site ends up empty. Although the implementation by the Stormtroopers is mostly ineffective, Hemlock still does everything he can to make sure the clones don't find their way onto Tantiss. The stolen shuttle takes some hard shots during the airspace action that we got. It's not exactly made for combat. This was also a nice inclusion because it focused on Hunter as a pilot, something I feel we haven't seen much of. They have to use the cables to escape the ship, and once again we see how different Rampart is from the clones. They've been through so much more than he has, despite him being a Vice Admiral at one point. He can play the role, but he doesn't have the same field experience and bravery that the others have. He was definitely turned into an over-the-top cowardly figure this episode, which got irritating at some points, but the screams and wailing also made him more of a comedic figure. It didn't work entirely for me, but it also wasn't something that I hated. At this point I'm kind of just indifferent towards the character. They keep bringing him along, because I guess humanity or something, but no matter what they do with him, he's a liability. Hunter makes it clear that he wishes Rampart had died in the crash, because it would be easier to operate without the dead weight, but I guess they also don't feel like he deserves to be abandoned in the jungle or shot to get rid of him. They still have some sense of morality and honor. There was also a moment where Crosshair recalls Tantiss not being a place you forget, and they made the gesture with his hand very obvious for audiences, almost to the point where it took me out of it. We've known all season that his hand is a problem, and we got the one moment on Pabu where AZ took a look at it on behest of Omega, but other than that we haven't gotten much explanation. Just Crosshair shaking his hand around. It feels a lot like when someone constantly complains about a problem but doesn't tell you anything more about it or try to do anything to solve it. They just want to have someone hear their problems. That's what this feels like to me. Unless we get answers in the finale, I'm tired of this being focused on so extensively, like having the close-up of his hand here. Crosshair and Rampart later have a short one-on-one conversation where they both mildly bond over being betrayed by the Empire. Rampart tries to bring up Crosshair's devotion to following orders, like he wants to make Crosshair believe that they're the same selfish person, but Crosshair admits that he's changed. Initially this made me really mistrust Rampart and whatever he had up his sleeve, and thought that it could lead to a major Crosshair moment later on when he has to prove that he's changed, but thinking back on it now, I think it could also be Rampart's attempt to bring Crosshair down with him and feel better about the choices he's made in his past. We've obviously seen throughout the show how bad of a person Rampart is, and while I don't really want it to happen, this conversation with Crosshair could ultimately lead to a Rampart redemption or sacrifice. As if his presence wasn't bad enough, Rampart makes the situation worse by resting on one of the native creatures, adding another threat to the Bad Batch as they try to sneak their way onto Tantiss, especially since they can't shoot at the creature, as blaster fire would give away their position. Rampart once again shows how cowardly he is, and although it wasn't long, I enjoyed the quick action sequence where we got to see all three clones go to work without their guns, proving how capable they are as soldiers, although Wrecker's big hit did make me worried at first. I was surprised that the creature was defeated by getting stuck in the trees, and honestly disappointed, but it returns a few moments later to actually distract the Stormtroopers, allowing the Bad Batch to escape again. This side of the episode ends with the Rampart being found, and there's a lot we could speculate about here, like whether or not he'll try to get on the Empire's good side or follow in Crosshair's footsteps, but I'm not too concerned about anything here because there isn't much information that Rampart knows about the Batch that he could spill that would ruin their plan. They probably didn't plan much beyond getting into Tantiss and freeing all of the clones, so he can't really give anything else up. Echo also got quite a bit to do in this episode, and his side of the story concluded with a moment that really caught me off guard. He starts off still stranded on the Imperial vessel, and he switches out his armor for some Stormtrooper gear, which means it's safe to say that his armor is gone. He left it in that storage closet, and I don't see him finding his way back to his armor, which bodes poorly for him in the finale. Unless he gets a whole new set of armor for the future, the next episode could be the last time we see Echo in action, which is a sad thought to think about. While he's sneaking around, Echo gets caught by one of the analyst droids, but blasting him surprisingly didn't cause any problems. But it does solve one, as Echo is able to get himself a new hand to blend in better. He escapes through the droid chute again, and he's able to make his way into the facility fairly easily, eventually ending up in the lab where he runs into Carr. Between putting his hand back on, not so subtly, and the way he was behaving, Echo wasn't really fooling anyone, despite the Stormtrooper gear. But what I wasn't expecting was for Carr to know all about Echo thanks to her conversations with Omega. Although we may never have seen the extent of them, it sounds like Omega trusted Carr enough to tell her all about her brothers. When she's accused by Echo of experimenting on all the clones, she tries to play herself out of it, saying that it was just her doing her job, which felt like a bland excuse. But it also felt like this is something Carr has been waiting for the opportunity to do for quite a while. She decided to help Echo out pretty quickly, without a moment of hesitation or consideration. Echo also needs her help to get into the vault, which is when he learns that there are other children besides Omega being held captive there. Although it caught me off guard, I'm very excited to see the two of them work together in the finale. Two very unique clones that could end up sacrificing themselves, and hopefully we get some good backstory in Carr as well. Moving on to Omega's side of the episode, this one had the big revelation near the end, but there wasn't much else that grabbed my attention. I liked how Omega was able to feel the laser cannons and quickly be able to figure out what it meant, and for some reason her line of "my brothers" hit hard for me. I also think it did a good job of continuing to contrast Omega from the other children who haven't experienced as much as Omega. They're clueless as to what's going on, and they don't know what Omega is really asking them to do when she makes her way into the walls, because they've never been in a situation like this before. So when Scalder and the test droid arrived to take their blood, their attempts at stalling were less than perfect. They did enough for Omega to make it back in time, but they looked lost as they came up with whatever they could to hold Scalder's attention. But anyways, the Zillo Beast is back again, and it's a hell of a lot bigger now too. It definitely wasn't the reveal I was expecting in this episode, and it didn't come with any explanation whatsoever, but it was exciting nonetheless. Based off of what we got here, my guess is that the finale will show Omega and the other children going to break the Beast out to cover their clone revolution and escape from Tantiss, but I do hope we learn more about what the Zillo Beast is there for, and what plans Palpatine and Hemlock have for it. Like I said earlier, there's a lot to answer in the finale, so hopefully it'll be a little longer than the rest of these episodes. What did you think of this episode of The Bad Batch? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video, and subscribe for coverage of The Bad Batch as a new episode premieres every week, and remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you. Always.